A first year in the painting and drawing department, Jessica Campbell.
Woohoo!
She's going to pull the slides up for me. Bring it. At the bottom, slideshow? Yeah. Just make sure, yeah, okay, that's good. Okay, so as I was preparing to do this, I was just going to tell like some regular jokes, but since I've been here, I've been thinking a lot about art history, modern art history, and all of the things that I've learned since being at this school, so I thought we'd sort of talk about that, share that with you. So starting with like the Impressionists and Post-Impressionists, I'm sure all of you are really familiar with Seurat, this painting, featured in the film Ferris Bueller's Day Off, also across the street in the museum. And as you know, Seurat was a pointillist who worked a lot with the ideas of color theory in the late 19th century, and this idea that if two colors were placed, dots of colors were placed close to one another, they would oscillate and create sort of like a buzzing effect, which turned out later to be totally fun. But what perhaps you didn't realize is that Seurat also invented, he successfully developed another theory that optical theory that we're familiar with. Manny, next slide. Oh? No, that's not it. Can you pause it? It's not paused, yeah, so the magic eye. And that painting actually features a bikini lady, if you will stand and look at it long enough. Camille Pissarro, next slide. Just press it. No, that's good. If you use the arrows, I think it works better. So Camille Pissarro also used this effect, though perhaps to less success. Next slide. I think it's kind of in poor taste. Alright, and then of course there's Van Gogh, another great post-impressionist. And of course we're all very familiar with Van Gogh. And while we might know that Hogarth invented the art print, which kind of democratized art and made it available to everyone, what a lot of people don't know is that Van Gogh also did this, if you go to the next slide, by inventing the dorm room poster. Next slide. You can see it there, a couple of them. All right, here we go. Pablo Picasso, hugely influential figure of 20th century art. Obviously, you all know him. This painting is sort of like the first instance of Cubism. And when you get to this point in modern art history, there's kind of a question that I always run into: where are the women in art history? Where are the women of modernism? And I think the next slide kind of illustrates that they're there. Another person who started as a Cubist painter, Marcel Duchamp, of course, this famous painting, Nude Descending a Staircase. But what perhaps he's more well known for is the ready-made. Next slide. Of course, you're all familiar with this. And what I didn't realize is that his invention, the urinal, actually is still very popular and used in most men's washrooms. If you go to the next slide, there you go. Next slide. Again. Next slide. Of course, I've never seen one before, but I hear that they are like really everywhere. And if you go to the next slide. Okay, so abstract expressionism. Very important movement in 20th century art. Of course, the huge figures, Jackson Pollock, next slide. Mark Rothko, next slide. Willem de Kooning. And if you ever have trouble recognizing this kind of art, it's not too hard. You just have to realize that it mostly consists of work my dad could have made, according to him at least. All right, and then we get to pop art, and I was going to make some flippant jokes about pop art and Andy Warhol. I had some jokes, but instead I thought I would just tell you guys a story because I think it's actually a little more interesting than any kind of jokes that I could have come up with. So I know Maddie introduced me, and of course some of you know me. My name is Jessica Campbell, and my family invented Campbell's soup a long time ago. This is something that I haven't probably talked to a lot of you guys about, but I have a little story about that because there's this kind of like family legend about my grandfather when he was running the company, meeting Andy Warhol, and so I talked to my dad recently about it. I wrote him an email, and he wrote me back about that story. So I'll just read the email that my dad sent me. Okay, it says, "Hi Jess, first, we are not going to rename the dog Mickey Bark, no matter how much you think he looks like Mickey Rourke and the rest. On to your question about that fruity weirdo. Yes, Grandpa knew Andy Warhol. I even met him once too. Just to start, what you have to realize is that even though Grandpa Campbell pretty much grew up in the soup factory, he never had any interest in running the company. In the early 40s, he left to go to Stanford, and this is just a note, he went to study kinesiology so he could become a gym teacher. But when your great-grandfather became ill later that year, he left his degree to come back to Camden, New Jersey, and temporarily manage the company until his father got better. But when his dad died a few years later, in the late 40s, the reins were handed over to him, and he officially became president and CEO. He did a good job with the company, and it expanded a lot around that time, but he never really felt like a part of the soup empire, and he always stayed interested in sports and even started new hobbies like buying art and bridge. Anyway, I'm not sure when Warhol started making those soup cans, but I'm pretty sure it was the late 50s maybe. I think it was actually later than that. And someone brought them to Grandpa's attention, maybe through his art connections or maybe someone in the company. I know that the legal team at Campbell's wanted to sue, but Grandpa said no, that he saw the soup can paintings as a kind of free advertising. Plus I think he kind of liked them, so at some point, I don't know when exactly, Grandpa wrote to him to say hello, that he left the work and whatever. Go to the next slide. And I actually found this letter on the Letters of Note blog. And Warhol wrote back kind of right away, I think, which was a surprise. I don't remember it happening, but Nancy, who's my aunt, later talked about how they were shocked. So he decided that Andy Warhol, that he wanted to come up to Camden to visit us, to see the factory where the soup was made. And I remember that. We were all very excited. I mean, we were used to fancy guests, but Andy was novelty. This would have been the mid-60s, I think, and he was already pretty famous at that point. I was a kid, so I didn't really understand the work, even when Dad tried to explain it to me, but I was excited to meet him. Then, of course, he came, and he was a very strange man. He didn't really talk to me or Nancy or even Mom very much, but he and Dad kind of hit it off immediately. I think that Dad might have made a suggestion that he do something about Jackie Kennedy, as of course JFK just died and he was such a great American, and I think Warhol even did that right. I'm pretty sure he did. Next slide. Then he did, of course, as you know. Well, as far as I know, that was all, as far as I knew, that was all that ever happened. Andy Warhol went back to New York, and the family kept living in Camden until Dad sold the company in the early 80s. But then, of course, in 1996, when Dad died, I cleaned out that old storage unit. It took a few weeks to clean out the storage unit because there was so much stuff in it, mostly his baseball cap collection and stuff and old sports equipment and that kind of thing. So then in the back, pretty much everything else had been cleared out, and there was this dusty old shoebox that didn't really look like anything, but I looked in it anyway, and it was full of letters. Next slide. They were addressed to Dad at some P.O. box, but I didn't recognize who they were from or the handwriting or anything. I took them home and put them in the closet and then didn't really think about it for a few years. Then years later we were cleaning and I started reading some of the letters and I realized they were from Andy Warhol. I still haven't read all of them and they aren't in any order, but I scanned a few of them like you asked. Next slide. It's clear from what I read that they were friends, but at some point there was a falling out or something. I mean, in particular, there's this one letter that is all ripped up, but then the pieces put back in an envelope, so I don't know. They all seem really short, except for the one that the ripped up one, but I don't know what it says. The date is from 1977, but otherwise I can't read it. So if you want to go to the next slide. So these are photos I found of my grandfather hanging out with Andy Warhol like in the 70s. That's him and Andy Warhol. The next one. And he's in the background there. And the next one. And there he is with Tennessee Williams and Andy Warhol. And the next one, there he is in the behind her faucet. Anyway, this is back to my dad's letter. Anyway, I kind of mentioned it to your grandma at some point, but she didn't know anything and didn't want to talk about it. So that's pretty much it. I'll let you go through the letters next time you home if you want. I hope Chicago's treating you well, don't get blown away by all the wind. Yeah, so that's kind of like where I'm at. I guess the next time I go home, I'm going to go through the letters and try to piece them together if I can organize them.